You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we doing live echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go.
Welcome back to Win the Day. The quote for this episode comes from Winston Churchill and says, "Success is the ability to go from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm." And the person we've got today certainly epitomizes that sentiment. In the pursuit of giving you everything you need to take ownership of your life, I try to give you a diverse mix of guests, as you've seen in the last few episodes. But I've never interviewed someone like who we've got today, Coss Marte. Coss's mother moved to the US from the Dominican Republic when she was 6 months pregnant with Coss. Settling in the Lower East Side of New York City, it was a brutal time, with skyrocketing crime statistics that made headlines around the world. At 11 years old, Coss began using drugs. Just 2 years later, at the age of 13, he was selling crack on the streets as a way to make ends meet. With the complete lack of positive role models and an environment riddled with crime, there were very little legitimate avenues available to him. Despite seeing extreme acts of violence and people killed, Coss was able to survive. Eventually, 6 years later, at 19 years old, he was at the helm of one of the largest drug delivery services in New York City. Through a team of couriers, dispatchers, and street soldiers, Coss distributed vast quantities of cocaine and marijuana to all segments of society, from public housing residents to cops, judges, and doctors, but especially Wall Street executives who had the salaries to match the insatiable appetite for his product. At its peak, the business was earning more than $5 million a year. Coss's drug business was so successful that he needed 8 mobile phones just to keep in touch with his customers. Eventually, the law caught up with him, and 23-year-old Coss was sentenced to prison and forced to turn over all proceeds from his criminal enterprise. It was the latest in a string of arrests that had seen him incarcerated 10 times since he first began dealing drugs as a 13-year-old. Giving up the lifestyle was tough, but since Coss had become a father for the first time, the feelings of abandonment from his baby son, who he had to watch grow up from behind bars, was the worst. While in prison, Coss was told that his cholesterol levels were through the roof and he would die if he didn't start taking care of his health. 6 months later, through a rigorous fitness regime from the confines of his cell, Coss lost 70 pounds and helped dozens of other inmates to do the same. His own transformation had reignited a flame of ambition, and when released, he launched ConBody, a fitness program that would help get people in the best shape of their life while offering employment prospects for people who had just left prison and couldn't find work anywhere else. Since then, through his studios and online programs, Coss has trained more than 50,000 people from around the world. He's an author, a TEDx speaker, and recently launched a crowdfund for a non-profit that helps equip formerly incarcerated people with the skills to succeed in the digital world so they don't need to return to a life of crime. This is a different and more somber style of interview than I've done before, and while we cover many of the raw aspects of Coss's past, none of it is used to glorify the life he used to lead. It's a wonderful tale of redemption and shows how the right accountability and focus can brighten even the darkest situation. Before we begin, I just wanted to include one final note. While Coss is very open about his past to help others make better decisions so they don't have to learn the hard way like he did, I asked Coss prior to the recording to avoid mentioning anyone or anything from his past life that could jeopardize his or his family's safety. All right, let's get into it. Coss Marte, great to see you, my friend. Thanks for being on the Win the Day show.
No, thank you so much, James, for the opportunity.
Well, to kick things off, take us into the Lower East Side of New York City during that period, the 1980s, and what it was like as a 13-year-old kid selling crack on the streets.
It was a crazy time. I remember just seeing just drug lines, down the block, and I remember seeing it was a normal thing to see and grow up to be a part of, that you thought it was some sort of job, and the community was like a part of it. It was like, yo, the cops are coming, and somebody will blow a whistle down the block and be like, hey, yo, and warn people, and some people would scatter. And sometimes the cops would just see stuff and just, turn a blind eye. because it was just so much craziness. You know, it was, I don't know, it was just insane. It was insane to see like buckets coming out off the roof, you know, with drugs, and people put their money in the bucket and then it'll be wearing back up and then just going back and forth, and lines just going crazy. It was just crazy.
And that was obviously a notoriously crime-ridden part of New York City. It made headlines around the world. Were there areas of the city where the police just refused to go into?
I mean, you would see the police, but you would not see them doing anything. You know, it was just so much going on that it became normalized that they would walk by, you know, prostitutes and, you know, just say hi to them and just keep it moving. You know, like it was, I felt like they just couldn't control what was happening, and they were part of the problem as well. Like they were just doing corrupt stuff. You know, they were taking money under the door or like robbing. You know, I've been robbed by cops before where they take my money and they just don't report it.
Wow, that's crazy. And how did the drug game work as a street level dealer? Did everyone have their own? Is it like you see in the movies where everyone's got their own corner and their own turf that other crews know that they're not supposed to be near unless they want to try and take it over?
Yeah, I mean, every corner was owned by somebody. It was not like you know, somebody from one corner comes to the next corner and they get shot. You know, it was nothing like that. But if you sold drugs on that block, you know, you would have a problem. I remember having a fight with, you know, somebody that sold drugs in my mom's block, and I sold drugs 2 blocks away. And I remember I saw like a common customer, and I was walking out of the building, and I just served them, and somebody told him that I was doing this, and we got into a fight, you know, and he pulled out a knife and started chasing me, and it was just like things that you would never imagine happened, but it was happening, and there was no cameras around. So, you know, like nowadays, like people are worried about the cameras watching them. There was no cell phones with cameras. You know, it was, you know, everybody had a beeper, and that was it.
Yeah, it was easier to get away with things back then before all the surveillance.
Absolutely.
What about, so you had these crazy times that were on the street. There must have been some crazy things. Are there other incidents, or maybe one incident in particular, like the one that you mentioned, that stood out as something particularly brutal that people who haven't lived that life might not have any idea about?
Yeah, no, I had a friend / neighbor get shot, you know, and got killed. He got shot 3 times in the head, you know, right in, you know, I was down the block. I was just standing on the corner, and the shots like rang off, and it was over a cell phone. You know, it was over a girl on a cell phone. It was just crazy to see how things could like escalate for something so minuscule. You know, like thinking about it now, you know, it's just like people would fight over, you know, stepping on somebody's Jordans, and like you step on my Jordans, like it's an automatic fight, like, you know. So it was things of that nature. I mean, I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. I don't know. I don't even know where. And there's just so many stories that I could get into. You know, especially with me and my business partner from back in the day. We just, I remember we went to Central Park. And there was like a horse and carriage there, and we were like walking around with our mink, you know, coats, and we were joking around with pimp sticks and stuff like that, and we just had so much money that we were like, yo, let's try to bargain with one of these horse and carriages and take them back to our neighborhood so we could sell drugs right on the corner with the horse and carriage, like we was sitting on a fucking like a pedestal, and there was a few, because they're not allowed to go under like 42nd Street or something. There's just a borderline, and so we convinced this lady. We gave her like $5,000 to like take us to the block, and the kids in the neighborhood started feeding them like apples and the horses apples and carrots, and we gave everybody money, and we're like literally going down like Fifth Avenue, like having crackheads, meet us in a horse and carriage, and we're just selling drugs out of a horse and carriage. We actually even went to like a McDonald's drive-through, and like bought like McDonald's, and they were like the window of the McDonald's. It was like, what the, like, it was crazy. It was just, we thought we were legal. We thought we were legal, but we got away with stuff like that, which was crazy.
How would people know that you were the dealer? How would people know where to go to, especially if you're mobile, if you're on a horse and carriage, or did people recognize you at that point?
At that point, I had a delivery service, and so people would, I was getting calls from all over the city, and people wanted drugs. So while we're like riding down the avenue, we're like, hey, meet us at, we're about to hit the corner of 14th and 5th, jump on the horse and carriage and then jump off. And then we're like hitting like to Houston Street, like we're on Houston and Broadway, we're here, meet us on this corner. It was just like something that I don't know, out of a movie that you really can't describe.
Yeah, it should make for a good movie at some stage in the future. So was there no concern or regard about any of those people wanting to buy drugs could possibly be undercover cops? Or was it just not even really on their radar, the big war of drugs? Did that sort of come later in different parts of the city with the big cleanup against all of crime?
Yeah, I mean, Giuliani was a mayor that just was like against crime. I remember, as a kid, just being stopped by cops constantly. For not doing anything, just going to the store and being searched. I've probably been stopped by cops on stop and frisk about probably over 200 times. Just because they knew I was up to no good, but they would, sometimes I was not up to it. I was just going to the store. I was just going down the block and just minding my own business or going home, and I'm just getting stopped, because I fit the description, or, somebody said, their whole thing was like, somebody said that you had a gun on you. And I'm like, I really never carry guns at that time. But yeah, I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Wow, that's insane. Well, eventually you make it from street dealer to head of a crew making, more than $5 million a year. How did that transition happen?
So we basically changed the way we sold drugs. I remember making like little pieces of paper and writing my number on it and like giving that out to people, and the neighborhood started getting gentrified in the early 2000s, like after 9/11. I remember landowners here. Nobody wanted to live in the Lower East Side, and I remember landowners offering people to move out like $20,000, and then they were fixing up their apartments and renting them out for like $3,000. And that's still happening today, which is crazy. But so gentrification happened quickly, and people, white little hipsters started moving in, and they had a lot of money, and I remember increasing my price from selling $20 bags to $50 bags, and then $100 grams, and it just kept escalating like that, and I was not scared of cops because how I basically marketed and found out that person was not a cop was just that I hung out with that person. I like met these individuals in bars and had smoked a blunt with them, and then I'll give them my card with a little bit of Coke sample on it, and then they just would call me there, and that's how it expanded. But I did get caught through phones, but that's a longer story.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into that one. So you have this whole business at that point. You've got dozens of people on your payroll. You've got drivers, couriers, people working all the different phones and things you had. What about the product side? Where did that come from? What could you sell it for, and who were you selling it to? I'm
not going to tell you where the product came from, but, everything is derived from, South America.
Yeah, Colombia and Mexico, probably.
Yeah. And so it was being delivered directly I guess, things were getting by through the mail, and there was people getting on planes and, bringing stuff in, and that's how things operated. Um, so I would buy like a kilo for about 20 grand and make $100,000 off of it, and we would move a kilo in a week, And so that's how we did it.
And are these, because you were dealing with some Wall Street types as well, weren't you? Like a lot of these corporate clients and things, were they telling you that there's certain other drugs and things that they wanted, or were there other customers who were telling you, hey, I need, a different type of drug that you then added to your portfolio?
The only thing that we added to our portfolio was weed. Funny you say portfolio, but yeah, no, we didn't really have like that many categories. I mean, I had messed around with like hashish and like e-pills and acid and all that stuff when I was younger. Like I was just on heroin. But once we started the delivery service, we just straight focused on coke and weed.
And who were the best customers to have?
Yeah, I mean, those Wall Street people, those kids that had a lot of money that moved into the city and was, paying $3 grand for a 200 square foot studio. Like it was crazy to see that. I've never seen these people just spend so much money frivolously. And there was actually a lot of Australians that were moving in, and I remember they. Australians were coming and they were paying like what, $150 a gram in Australia and for coke. And then when they came to the city and we told them $100 dollars a gram, they were like, "Wow, can I get like 20?" And it was just like, "Oh shit, this person is going all out." And so we had these people that were coming from and moving into New York City, and that was our best customers, these people that had professional jobs, coders, finance people, and they all partied. And the word got out there. Even doctors, I've sold to lawyers, judges, cops. It's just crazy.
Interesting times, isn't it? Well, what about at the absolute peak of your powers? You're bringing in $5 million a year with the business. I think it was more than $2 million in profit, wasn't it? What was life like at that point? Can you talk us through like what experiences were you having? Were you happy at that time? Were you wanting more?
I was always wanting more, and I was pretty greedy. I didn't care about. I had a cold heart. I just didn't really care who was hurt by my drugs. I just wanted the money, and I wanted to keep growing. It was crazy. I spent money frivolously and like just didn't really care, how, what was going on. I know the money was just going to keep going and coming, and it was fun. I mean, I was not sad at that at those times. It was a lot of crazy partying and messing around in the streets, and that was just the mentality that I had. It was just like, I didn't care who I had to step over or hurt, to get that money.
So it was living for the present, not trying to set yourself up for the future. Is that why the idea of quitting while you were ahead never entered your mind? Or maybe it did enter your mind?
It did. I mean, I definitely wanted to get into some type of real estate. I try to get like my real estate broker license when I was younger, and but I had a record, and so I couldn't get it, and so that prevented me from entering that business. But I was looking into buying like foreclosed houses and buying stuff, and I got caught up with my friend. We spent a lot of money. We saw this ad on TV where you could buy like foreclosure houses, and we spent so much money on just a gimmick that robbed us for our money. It was just crazy.
Wow. Well, when did you realize the whole operation had come undone or was about to come undone and you were facing some very serious consequences?
It was the day I got caught. I didn't know it was going to be, I didn't know. I was caught totally by surprise. And so the way we got caught, I had a dispatcher. And this dispatcher, we had him set up. All our dispatchers we had in condos with, the cars. They had a salary, and all they had to do was just answer the phone and just tell the people, where to go. And they had the packages that they handed over to the deliverers. And so this guy basically went behind our back and took a card and made a new phone number card. And so he gave it to new customers or trying to steal our customers. And that card ended up in one of my clients who had my personal number. So this client of mine like hits me up, and I used to hang out with this guy. He's like, yo, this guy gave me a card. Do you have it's a new number now? And the product is not the same. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because our product was like always grade A. We didn't cut anything. It was straight from like, the ship to your nose, and that's how we delivered it. And so he was like, yeah, they're serving green bags now. And I'm like, that's not my bags. Like my bags are just clear. And I was like, and he told me like, I got a new card too and a new number. I was like, yeah, let me get that number. So I grabbed the number from him and I called it, and I heard the dispatcher that I employed answer that phone. And I was like, yo, what the fuck is he doing? And he quickly hung up. And he had all the phones in his possession at the time. And so I had a connection with T-Mobile. We had like prepaid phones, and I went and turned off all the phones and returned them on with new cell phones, and just did it that way. And that phone number that he had started was being tapped by federal agents. And I took that phone number and started operating with that number too, because I thought it was like, all the customers he stole from me. And so there's where the investigation started. They had a year-long investigation on me. They had about 40 sales from all my drivers. They didn't even know that there was, 6 other phones that we were operating with. And we had to get so many phones because each phone only held 1,500 to 2,500 contact numbers. So back then, you couldn't hold, tens of thousands of contacts in a phone like right now. This has so much memory, but that's how we did it. We had a whole bunch of phones and we just kept pushing it, and we kept sending people. And I remember, not trusting any more dispatchers. I started doing everything by myself, and that's how we got caught. They had about 40 sales, direct sales from all my drivers that night. I remember I went to the stash house to drop off some weed in the stash house, and I go upstairs, and I'm getting a whole bunch of calls from clients, and so I'm sending all my drivers, and my drivers one at a time were getting picked up. There was I don't know if you remember the next cell phone numbers with the walkie-talkie, but we were like sending them and radio dispatching them through the Nextel walkie-talkie. So it was like, but when it didn't go through, it used to go beep, beep. And that meant like they were busy, they were on the phone. And I kept doing that and it kept going off. So I kept sending other drivers to, different places because we had a list of like 50 people waiting for us. And it kept going. And after like my 9th driver that night, I said, fuck that. I'm going to go make these deliveries myself. I can't wait. I have so many people waiting. I don't know what these guys are doing. And so I grab a whole bunch of packages. I go downstairs. And as soon as I go downstairs, this I'm in the middle of the Bronx, like straight, like black Hispanic neighborhood. You don't see white people there, but I saw this big white guy, and he was standing outside the house, and he pulled out his badge and he said, "This is Federal Agent Joseph King. Your whole operation is over." And I'm like, "What the fuck?" He's like, "You Coss Marte, right?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I try to turn around and run, but they quickly just tackled me, and then they had a warrant, and they went upstairs, and they were like, "Where's all the stuff?" Because I had it stashed, and they knew exactly where everything was. They went directly to the boxes where the drugs were. And
So they'd found people in your company who'd been able to, inform about where all these things were.
yeah, one of the drivers told, and he told him exactly, where everything was stashed at, and it was crazy. I just knew that somebody told, because when they brought me upstairs and they were like, "Don't worry, we know everything." They went exactly. So I had about 500 pairs of Jordans, sneakers, and which I sold to start Comp Body. So they went exactly to the pair of sneakers where all the drugs was at, in that box, and they opened it up, and it was over.
Wow. So you're arrested. You're initially faced with a life sentence because of the 3 strikes law that imposes the mandatory life sentence if you had 2 prior convictions. You ended up with a 7-year sentence with I think it was a non-parole period of 5 years. What was it like in court when you're just sitting there waiting to see how much of your life is going to be taken from you?
It's nerve-wracking. I think that's one of the most nerve-wracking situations that I had to face in my life. Other people could be nervous about other stuff. I mean, I've been in shootouts. I've seen people pass away in front of me. But to see a judge and you're in cuffs and having them decide, the future of your life, it's like they could kill you right there. Once you're away, you're not alive. And that's how I felt.
Sure. So you're off to prison at that point. It wasn't the first time you'd been to prison, but it was the largest sentence. How was your first night on the inside, knowing that it was going to be a long time before you'd be able to see your son again?
It was sad. I think that's what hurt me the most, because I remember that day I got arrested. I spent pretty much the whole day with him, and my wife she was my fiance at the time, and we got married. And when I went inside prison, but divorced when we got out. And but yeah, I mean, it was hard. If anybody has kids, you feel it in your heart. It's like, and then also speaking to him over the phone was just I taught him his ABCs, over the phone, like over a prison phone, So it's. And he would always come to visit me and say, like, when you coming home, and that broke my heart, when he would cry, and I would tell him I can't go home,
Yeah, a big part of that, he probably doesn't understand why his dad's not there with him. What about in prison? What's an average day like in prison?
I mean, you try to forget about the real world. You're living in a different planet in there. There's just a different set of rules. You have there's a lot of racism going on in the States, and so there's black gangs. There's Bloods, there's Crips, there's Latin Kings, there's there's just all types of gangs running stuff, and sometimes you end up in a housing unit that's full of mostly Bloods, and then sometimes you're in a Crip house, sometimes you're in a more Lion King house. So you just got to be ready to adapt. And I knew how to adapt, because I was a kid when I went in, and I remember when I was a kid, I had to fight every single day because I was not part of a gang. And the adult side of things were a little bit more lenient in terms of you not being in a gang. But that meant you couldn't use the certain phones, so you have 3 pay phones. You only could, there's a neutral phone, there's a Spanish phone, and then there's a, black gang phone. And, I was part of the Spanish, I was not in a gang, but I was always hanging out with the Spanish gangs. And I was okay to use the Spanish phones, and sometimes the gang members would take away that neutral phone, if you were not part of the unit, you couldn't make a phone call. Seeing people get extorted for food, it's just crazy fights over TV, like a lot of fights over the TV. Whether somebody's watching the Spanish channel and somebody wants to watch regular news, and somebody will just go up to the TV and change it. You have to just be ready to fight. They say pull out your gun, which you don't have a gun, but they call your knife is your gun, and that's what you say in prison.
Wow, that's crazy. Was it more violent inside, or was it more violent on the streets?
Definitely inside. Definitely more violent inside. In the streets, you could be incognito, especially after things change with cell phones and delivery services. It was not that corner to corner type of issue from back in the day. Inside was just a bit more crazy.
Mm. And what about working? Were you able to earn any money while you were on the inside with any? Because there's a lot of corporations that actually, have almost slave labor wages, don't they? With some incarcerated people in the US.
Yeah, so I was working as a customer service agent for the Department of Motor Vehicles, earning 7 cents an hour.
7 cents an hour.
That's an hour. So I was my monthly wage was about $40.
Wow, that's crazy. How do they justify 7 cents an hour?
I have no idea. It's all robbery. It's all it's a money making business. You have the department pay the prison a certain amount. That department, it pays the inmates, and they take a cut. So they could say like, hey, we'll deliver all the customer agents for you, for $10 an hour rather than $20 an hour, and then you get paid whatever they tell you that you're gonna get paid. And you want to do something while you're inside. You have to do something just to keep occupied, and if you don't work, you get in trouble too.
There's so many ways you sort of cease being human, don't you, when you enter the prison system? Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's part of the law. If you're incarcerated, you're subject to being a slave.
Wow. Well, 5 years in, you're only a couple of months away from being released, but an assault from a guard lands you in solitary and stacks more time on your sentence. How did that happen, and how did you keep the faith?
I was devastated when I ended up in solitary confinement. I had 2 months left towards my release, and I remember, when the officers beat me up and threw me in solitary confinement in 24-hour lockdown, I felt devastated. I felt hopeless. I thought I couldn't get out of the situation until this officer came to my door and opened up the food slot where they gave us the food and passes me a paper pen and an envelope. And I quickly grabbed that, so I could communicate with my family. So I thought I wrote a letter, and I thought I was going to let them know about, the whole situation and how this officer set me up and beat me up. And I enclosed this letter, and then I realized I had no stamp to send out this letter with. And I became more restless. I sat on my bed and started banging my head on the wall, just frustrated and just hopeless. And it was not until maybe 3 or 4 days where my sister, finds out I was in solitary, and she tells me, she writes me a letter and tells me, we found out you're in solitary. Everything's going to be all right. All I want you to do is pray. And my sister is like super religious, and she told me to pray Psalm 91. And I was like, fuck that. I don't need God. I don't need a religion. I need a lawyer. I need to fight this case. This guy's trying to set me up. And it was not until a couple of days where I decided to pick up the Bible, which was the only thing in the cell, the only thing that follows you around through your whole prison sentence. And it was this Bible that she gave me on early in my incarceration in Rikers Island. And I turned to Psalm 91, which states, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my shelter and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. And as soon as I read those words, there was a stamp that fell out of the Psalm pages. And that gave me chills, that gave me, I was struck by like awe and I kept reading. And something weird happened to me. I was like in 100 and something degree weather, like super hot cell, frustrated. But every time I read the Bible, I felt like that I was in a cool 70-degree weather and sitting in the Caribbean, like I escaped that cell, for that moment every time I began reading and started getting lost in those words. And I read the Bible from front to back. And I'm not a person that's super religious or, I'm not trying to convert anyone. But this is what happened to me. And I read the Bible from front to back, and I started realizing what I was doing was wrong. I felt like drugs were okay to sell. I felt like, I was not doing anything wrong. The system was wrong. I thought I was the victim in every situation. And then I started realizing that I was affecting not only like the thousands of people that I sold drugs to, but I started, thinking about their families. I started thinking about my family. I started thinking about this web of destruction that I created, and I felt so much regret, and I said I want to give back in some sort of way. And so I came up with the idea of Combody in that cell after losing 70 pounds in 6 months. And helping over 20 inmates who's over 1,000 pounds combined. So I started this whole workout program in the prison yard. And I said, this is what I want to come home to do. I want to start a prison-style boot camp. And in that cell, I wrote a little mini business plan, wrote out my whole 90-day workout plan, and utilized that time. And I remember enclosing that huge, those pieces of paper in an envelope, and I said I was going to do what I wrote, and I did what I wrote. I came home about a year later behind that situation, and I did it. I went to the park, training classes in the park, to renting out studios, to then eventually opening up my first studio, and then a gym, and then it's just started escalating to building a online workout platform. Which I virtually train now thousands of people. We've trained over 50,000 people today from all around the world. And the most beautiful thing is that we've hired over 40 people coming out of the prison system, and none of them have gone back into the system.
Wow, that's incredible. And the statistic, isn't it, is that 53% of people in New York are likely to be back inside prison within 3 years. Yeah.
And that's just New York. Within 5 years, it's 76%. Within 8 years, they came out with a new study. 82% of the people will go back into the system. So 3 out of 4 people will go back. And I'm a proven statistic. I recidivated, and a lot has to do with the lack of opportunities that you receive when you come home and out of the system.
So how did you initially spread the word about Combody? You're inside, you've got this amazing idea for a business, but it's only when it's really started that you learn just how good the business is. How were you able to spread the word, and were there any principles or lessons you had from your former life that were able to help you build this business?
Yeah, I remember when I was when I got out of solitary confinement, I had to do this like group class. It was like part of this like drug, they call it ASAT. Alcohol Substance Abuse Treatment Program, and you had to do a couple months of that. So I remember in the middle of the class, it's a whole bunch of inmates, and they tell us like, what's your plan when you come home? So I remember getting up in front of the class and telling all the inmates there, and I was like, look, I'm going to start a prison-style boot camp. I'm going to hire people coming out of the system, blah blah blah. And I told them the whole idea of Combody. And people were just laughing and chuckling, and they thought it was crazy, And I was like, I got mad. I was like, this shit's gonna fucking pop off. Like I know how to build the business from the ground up, And that was just my mentality, that nothing was gonna stop me, and I was determined to make this thing happen. And I came home and I used the same marketing skills, same hustling tactics that I used when I was selling drugs. I was going up to random people, giving them my business card. Anybody that was, any females wearing yoga pants who were jogging down the block, I'm chasing after them and just, pitching them left and right. And that's that became my whole thing. I just kept doing it, and from there it started escalating.
So did you find people who are currently incarcerated and you trained them as personal trainers, or is it once they were released you were able to train them as personal trainers and bring them into ConBody?
Yeah, once they were released. So I started everything by myself. I was teaching all the classes. I was running the whole business. I couldn't afford to pay anyone at that, in the beginning stages. It took me a little bit over a year and a half before I hired my first guy. And then I remember one of the guys that I was locked up with that saw me lose a lot of weight, and he contacted me the first day he came home, and he read about me in an article and saw it and became my Facebook friend. And he hits me up on Facebook and he's like, "Hey, yo, can I be a trainer there?" And I put him on board, and then it just kept spreading like that.
I love it. That's so good. And this year as well, you started a crowdfunding campaign for Second Chance Studios, which has raised more than $60,000. What's your aim with Second Chance Studios, and why is it such an important project for you?
Yeah, I feel like one of the biggest issues when people coming out of the prison system is that we have a lot of manual labor jobs. And that's pretty much the only thing that one could land when they come out. There's just so many statistics of people, not landing jobs. One out of 5 people that are unemployed in America are formerly incarcerated people, which is crazy. That's millions and millions of people with criminal histories, and that correlates to people going back. And especially during COVID time, like anybody that had a manual labor job pretty much lost their job and couldn't go back. And so now, with the technical skill side of it, we launched Second Chance Studios, which will hire and train people to do podcasting work, video production, audio engineer. And so what we want to do is we want to have corporations hire these individuals once they go through our program and solidify their training. I also want to hire people from a ConBody point of view to do our video recording and our audio stuff on the ConBody side as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's perfect timing as well with the pandemic and the push to remote work, to being able to have these people that they can do it from. They can work for people all around the world from the comfort of their own homes. That's awesome. You've been a TEDx speaker. You've been an author as well. You've done all these amazing things. When were you released? How long ago was it since you've been able to do all these awesome ventures?
It's been a while. March 2013 already.
Nice. Yeah, you've done really well. And I have the utmost respect for the journey that you have been on. Obviously a very, very difficult upbringing, but it's the bigger the setback, the bigger the comeback. What about if you had one change to make to the prison system? It sounds like there's a lot of work that needs to be done, particularly over here in America. What's one change that you think needs to be made? Because helping formerly incarcerated individuals develop skills, earn money, these are the changes that need to be made, rather than being afraid of this group of people if we're to have a meaningful society.
I think we need to believe in redemption, and I feel like everyone in this planet has committed some type of mistake, something immoral or something bad. Not everyone's perfect, and we need to realize that we will all commit mistakes. If we didn't commit mistakes, we wouldn't learn from our mistakes. And I feel like our system here is all about punishment, and from all around the world. You could say, like, once you go into the jail or prison system, it's some sort of punishment, and it's not. And they call it correctional facility. I feel like we need to correct the problem. And I think by how we do that is we get people that care, instead of bringing correctional officers that just want to hit you with batons and beat you up and turn you more into a criminal and wanting to fight the system. Why not have trained correctional officers, trained staff members that really care and want to correct the problem, train individuals, reform people and believe in these second chances?
Yeah, well, hopefully a lot of awareness that can be created by, there's documentaries now on Netflix and stories like your own. Hopefully this can help inspire some of that change.
All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Well, let's quickly do the Win the Day rocket round, which is 10 questions for some fairly quick answers if you're ready for this. Number 1, what quote inspires you the most?
So I think the quote that inspires me the most, I always write it down, but I forget. Um, Sorry, this is not quick.
You're right. I was trying to think of a quote the other day. Was it at Podfest, where I was like, it's one of my favorite quotes, and I completely forgot what it was as I was trying to talk about how powerful and how memorable this quote was. So you take as much time as you need. I know how hard it is when someone puts you on the spot, and it's like, damn it, it's somewhere in my mind.
Yeah, no, Winston Churchill definition of success: moving on from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes too. Fantastic. Question 2, morning coffee or evening wine?
Both.
Me too. Number 3, what's one bit of advice you would give to your 18-year-old self?
I would just want to. There's more than just the box that you live in. There's start looking around you. Start exploring other parts of the city. Start exploring other parts of the country. There's different. Think outside the box more.
Number 4, what book do you gift the most, or what's your favorite book?
Calm Body.
Nice. I love it. Good promo. Was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower? This is a question that a lot of people normally need to think about. Was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
I think being true to myself. I don't know, just not lying. Not being afraid to tell the truth and just pass on that. In terms of. I sometimes lied on a job application that I didn't have a criminal history, and then and then they would kick me out from that job interview once they found out that I lied on that application. And so, just being honest with oneself and not being afraid of what happens when you be honest.
Yeah, it's a big part of that trajectory that you're on, isn't it? Having that ownership over the situation that you're in and the past that you've had, and it's how you've been able to really embrace the situation you're in to help change, as you said, more than 50,000 lives around the world now, which is awesome. What's one thing you've learned about failure?
We have to fail. We have to fail to succeed. It's just all learning tools, and step by step we'll continue to fail, but that's how we figure out not to fail.
Number 7, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone, alive or dead, who would it be?
I think my fiance. I love talking to her and just hanging out, and we could sit anywhere and talk.
Nice. I don't think my wife would say her husband if I asked her that question. Number 8, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or business?
Tool or resource. I don't know. I guess Google Suite, just like Google Calendar, Google Sheets, Google spreadsheets,
Yeah, collaboration in real time with a bunch of different people. Yeah, it makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Number 9, share one thing on your bucket list. Now, I know you've already been to Australia, so that can't be on the list. Is there something else that you still want to tick off?
I want to go a lot of places that I haven't been to. I don't know. I jumped out of a plane in Australia, so that was check that one off.
Nice.
I want to jump off a cliff and do one of those those how people look like flying squirrels.
Yeah.
I want to mess around and do that.
Nice. I've actually got a good friend who I'll connect you with next time you do go to Australia who'd love to take you on that. He also does meditation in free fall to try and keep his heart rate down. He did once he realized he had a fear of heights, he did 200 skydives in 1 year. He's an incredible guy. You should actually get on his podcast show too. I'll connect you guys after this.
Please.
And final question, mate. What's one thing you do to win the day?
I think working out is the biggest thing. I feel so accomplished when I wake up in the morning, get ready and just go out there and just do a run or just work out. And then I feel like I accomplished that.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Coss. It's a wonderful example of what you can accomplish when you take ownership of your life and dare to dream big. During the pandemic especially, I know a lot of you are struggling with the isolation and feelings of despair, so much so that it's easy to feel like we're in prison or house arrest, but hopefully you can use Coss's story for some inspiration. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button, and if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends to subscribe too. Win the Day with James Whittaker is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. We've got some big episodes coming up that I know you're going to love. That's all for this episode. Remember to get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.